Roch St-Georges, real estate broker in Ottawa. Let's talk about the 2.5 rent increase cap that the Ontario government has come out with and how this affects landlords and tenants. Here you go. Roch St-Georges, real estate broker. I help families relocate to the city as well as invest in real estate, multifamily properties or commercial properties in Ottawa. I wanted to discuss the 2.5% rent increase cap that the province has put in place. As you know, inflation is running high, and governments across the world, as well as in Canada and in the province of Ontario, are trying all they can to curb inflation and dampen the blow inflation is having on Canadian families. If you are in a unit or if you own a unit that was built prior to November 15, 2018, you do need to abide by the rent control guidelines that the province puts out. So if you own a property, or if you're in a property that was built prior to November 15, 2018, the maximum rent increase for the year will be 2.5%. So I chose two of my properties, multifamily properties. These are properties that have more than one unit. I'm going to share with you some of the expenses, some of the income, and see how that plays out in my net income per year based on this 2.5% cap that we've just learned about. Now, if you're a landlord in the province, there are things you need to abide by as well. You need to provide 9 days notice to your tenant that you will be increasing rents. You also can only increase rent once every 12 months. If you're in the province of Ontario, there is a simple form to use. It is the N1 form. It is available on the Landlord and Tenant Board's website. If you have any questions, if you're a tenant or a landlord, you have any questions, you can consult the Residential Tenancies Act of 2006, or you can call the Ontario Landlord and Tenant Board and ask questions to them. In Ontario, the province has historically allowed rents to increase by the province's Consumer Price Index, also known as CPI. It tracks goods, and basically from there we calculate inflation and therefore calculate what the rent cap should be every year. Over the long term, from 2008 to 2020, yearly CPI and rents have increased at 1.7% on average, so they've been following each other, which is great. Right now, CPI is much higher than the rent increase allowed, so it will be interesting to see how this plays out in the coming years. We can also notice on the chart here, we can also see that 2021, which I was talking about, that was capped at 0%, so there was a rent freeze to help tenants during the pandemic. So meaning that for landlords from 2021 to 2020, real apartment rents will have lagged the CPI in the rent controlled units for 2 of the last 3 years. And inflation at this point seems to be coming in higher and higher every month. So we'll see how this plays out in the coming months and years. Now, Canada's Consumer Price Index rose in May 2022 by 7.7%. That is, of course, compared to May 2021. This is the largest yearly increase since January 1983. The biggest driver of inflation seems to be gasoline. When we remove gasoline from the equation, CPI actually rose by 6.3% year over year. In Ontario, we saw a 7.8% increase year over year, while PEI saw the largest increase year over year. Inflation hit 11.1% as shown in the graph. Now, of course, I'm a real estate broker. I am also a landlord. I also manage properties for clients. How do I feel about the 2.5% cap? Well, I do agree that we should be capping rents in the province to help curb the high cost of living and to dampen the blow inflation is having on Canadian families. On the other side, not all rentals are owned by a large publicly traded real estate investment trust or owned by a large corporation that own hundreds of units. Many multifamily properties, rentals in the province of Ontario are owned by small landlords, and they might be families just like yours that just so happen to have chosen real estate as their investment vehicle instead of contributing to TFSAs or perhaps even their RSPs. They may not have a pension network, so for them, multifamily investing is what they've chosen. Now, depending on the financial situation, inflation for these folks that own properties can sometimes hit just as hard as they've hit tenants who live in their units. The scenario could also be different for those who purchase recently versus those who purchased a few years back, based on factors like the amount owing on the mortgage, the terms of their mortgage, and if their financing costs have gone up. So if you relied on some of the Bank of Canada's messages from 2020, thinking that there wasn't going to be an increase in rates prior to 2023, well, you may now be surprised by the recent hike and fast hikes in mortgage rates. So you might be affected more if you've only listened to Bank of Canada. So it does affect people differently. Now, I had a look at two of my buildings. Both of these buildings are multifamily properties. This means that in the building there's more than one unit. And I want to show you how expenses have arisen in the last years, and how the rent increase of 2.5% kind of plays into the net revenue monthly or yearly there. Now, this is just to give you some insight. It might help you understand the position your landlord could find themselves in. And of course, we are only halfway through the year, so I've only been able to compare January to July of both 2021 and 2022. And I haven't included things like repairs and maintenance, simply because repairs and maintenance kind of fluctuate year by year. I have only kept it to utilities as well as snow removal, like you'll see. I find these expenses a little more predictable and easier to compare year over year, especially that these properties have not undergone any significant changes during that time. So property A, the most noticeable increase, as you can see in the chart, is the electricity and natural gas, i.e. the heating. So electricity has gone up 59.9%, while heating has gone up 37.2%. The snow removal contract also seems to have increased for this property quite a bit. This is likely due to the rising cost of fuel. So if we look at expenses so far from January 1st to July, the expenses have gone up $923 higher than last year. It's about a 12.3% increase over last year, same time. We can already see that the 2.5% increase in rents may be an issue for this one here. Now, looking at rents for this property, rents at this time are $38,189, which means I can increase rent by 2.5% in 2023. An additional income of $954 per year is what I can expect for this property. So as I said, if expenses continue to increase for the rest of the year from July up to December, which I can only assume they will, the increase for this property of 2.5% will not be sufficient to offset the rise in expenses on property number A. For property B, the most noticeable increase once more is electricity and heating. Electricity has gone up 23.9%, while heating, which is natural gas on this unit, is 67.8%. The snow contract on this property didn't go up as much for some reason, but has been going up a little bit. Overall, there's still a $1,468 increase in fees for this year compared to last year. This represents about an 8.9% increase. Looking at rents on this one, rents are $116,340. A 2.5 increase on these would include would mean a $2,908 increase in rents, which on property number B seems to be saying that it would be sufficient to cover the rise in expenses for this building in particular. It's important to note on this last building, property B, that there's a turnover of tenants every few years, which allows us to re-rent the property, the units at market rent, while property A is old and tenants stay in place for longer, rents are lower. They stay there for many, many years, and rents have not always been increased prior to us owning the property. So it's going to be harder for us to catch up to market rents on that one. And as a landlord, if you have a property that has rents that are below market, you will notice that the tenants have very little interest in leaving and trying to find an alternative unit, because nearby units might have become much more expensive, or if they're the same price, they might be much smaller, offering less features and whatnot. So older properties tend to have an issue with increasing rents. You'll likely never be able to catch up to market rent. Now, as a landlord, should you increase rents for your rental units? I don't really have the answer for you, but we often see landlords at the time of the sale telling us that their rents are below market rents, and oftentimes that was because the tenants always paid on time, they were nice, and the landlord didn't want to lose them, so they never increased the rents. This is not a problem, but you need to understand that for multifamily properties, the property value is often tied to the gross revenues that you bring in. So if you want to maximize your profit at a sale, you need to understand that having higher rents will bring you that higher value at the sale. If you chose real estate as an investment vehicle and you are making it a business, you could treat it as a business as well by analyzing the market. You could use tools like Zumper or rentals.ca to look at comparable nearby units that are renting and to see if there's room for you to increase your rents without potentially losing the tenant to a better unit that might be bigger, less expensive, and whatnot. So maybe that's one tool you want to use to analyze if you should be increasing rents on your property. I am of the opinion that if you have rents that are well below market value and that you are planning to sell the building in the foreseeable future as part of your investment strategy, then rents should likely be increased. If you are looking to discuss real estate, if you're looking to discuss real estate investing in Ottawa, do give me a shout. My cell phone number is 613-889-7732. Mon numéro de téléphone, c'est le 613-889-7732. N'hésitez pas à me rejoindre. Mon numéro peut aussi recevoir des textos si vous préférez. Et vous aussi m'envoyer un courriel au courriel au bas de l'écran. You can also text me or you can send me an email using the email on the screen. Thank you so much. Merci. Bonne journée. Au revoir.